Welcome to the Daily Horror Habit Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Krieger, bringing you daily reviews of currently streaming horror movies for your twisted pleasure. Be aware that these reviews may include mild spoilers. And as always, I hope you enjoy. Today I'm joined by a friend of the show, Sam, to review Robin Hardy's 1973 occult horror thriller, The Wicker Man, which is currently streaming on Netflix. How's it going, man?
Going great, man. How you doing?
Not too bad. I'm excited to have you back on again. We had such a good chat last time, so
Good to be
I'm
back.
excited to talk about a movie that is completely different than Sinister, which we talked about last time. But had you seen The Wicker Man before?
No, I've never seen it before, but I always see these memes with Nicolas Cage in the newer version, like the remake. And he's just doing some wild shit. And you see the literal Wicker statue in those memes. So I was always like, what is this? And then I just happened to see the movie on Netflix, the original. And I was like, I didn't even know this was an original version of that movie, the Nicolas Cage movie. So kind of piqued my interest, and then it just kind of kept coming up, and I was like, I gotta check it out.
That was the Nicolas Cage kind of memes that spawned from the remake, which is pretty sure notoriously not very good, is putting it in a nice way. But that's kind of like how I became aware of just the Wicker Man movie. But then also, it is one of those movies that I feel like always gets mentioned in like horror movie retrospectives and just cult horror movies in general. So it's one of those movies I was glad you picked because it's kind of one of those glaring omissions from my watch list that serves as the basis and inspiration for a lot of movies. And in finally getting a chance to watch it, I think that that's very evident from kind of just the opening moments of the movie.
It's a blueprint.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely has that blueprint feel to it. And not only just in terms of it being like a horror movie, but I feel like from the opening moments, the way it carries itself, you can almost see little bits of all these other movies that we grew up watching. And just the influence that this movie had is just super apparent from the jump.
Yeah.
But for people that haven't seen The Wicker Man, it's about a Puritan police sergeant, Sergeant Howie, is sent to the Scottish island village in search of a missing girl who the townsfolk claim never existed. But more immediately alarming are their strange pagan rituals. So this is a little off topic, but had you seen Midsummer?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we watched it together, actually.
Oh, see, that's how bad my memory is.
Yeah. We watched it together for sure.
Okay, so not to say that this movie or that Midsummer is overly Wicker Man-esque, but I feel like I was able to draw a lot of the parallels between the two, kind of just based on the heavy musical and like ritual aspect of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, there are instances throughout the movie where not only do you have that influence, the ritualistic musical aspect of it, but there are like specific things that they do in the movie that they do in Midsommar.
Right.
Like that scene with the kids, the children, and they're like running around that pole and they're holding them, whatever it is.
They're like ribbons or something.
The ribbons, like, isn't that a scene in Midsommar? Like, don't they play a game or something like that?
Yeah, so that's a great example because they have a scene where the girls are dancing around. It's like for I forget what the festival is called, the Mayflower Festival or something like that, or the Maid Queen. And they're like dancing around that. And that was the first thing I thought about. And Wicker Man more so than Midsummer, I definitely thought I was surprised by how much this movie is basically like a musical. Like the music, it has such a key part of just not only the atmosphere, but it drives entire scenes in a way that it does feel like a musical.
Well, yeah, there was, I mean, that scene that we were just talking about with the ribbons, that was a musical aspect, right? The man was singing. That moment with the woman in her room and the sergeant's in the next room, like
the landlord's daughter.
Yeah, that little musical situation was so weird, but also like I really digged it because I almost felt like it fit. For whatever reason, it fit. Like it didn't seem out of place.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like she was showing her, I don't even know how to explain it, her influence on him, and like he was going through his motions and like try not to succumb to like, the woman.
The like fertility ritual.
Yeah. But it was the way they had her do it. I don't know if that was directed of her to like do certain things, but it just felt like it made sense for the movie and for her character and for where the movie was going. I love that scene a lot. I'm not saying that because she was like, obviously not wearing clothes,
Right.
but like actually what she was doing was like unsettling
Mhm.
and weird. And then like you also were like, what is that?
Well,
What is,
something that I think Wicker Man does really well that a lot of horror movies with cults in it don't do that well is that when you're introduced to one of these new cults or this new culture, it's supposed to be very obviously different to the protagonist's understanding of life and all of these things. But
yeah.
sometimes I think the presentation early on can be so aggressive that you're immediately like, this is dangerous. This is not right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the director is Robin Hardy and the screenwriter is Anthony Schaefer. They do such a good job of making it a confusing way of life, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily super hostile right from the beginning. You know what I mean? Like it's
They
very,
ease into it.
yeah, they ease into it in a way that it feels like a misunderstanding of or a not understanding a certain culture rather than it being inherently
Mm-hmm.
dangerous right from the jump. And you kind of immediately are like, how he needs to dip right now.
Yeah.
And just kind of that different type of way to get into it, I think it really does a good job, like you said, of just easing you into this world and really exploring it.
Well, I love how you say that because there were a bunch of scenes where the literal townspeople are like, "What do you mean? Like, of course this is something." Like when the women were jumping over and around the fire and they were naked,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, "What do you think?" The sergeant's like, "They're out there, they're naked, like they're not wearing clothes." And the guy's like, "Of course they're not wearing clothes. Like you wouldn't want to get your clothes caught on fire, jumping over
Right.
fire." And like he's like justifying why they're doing this like really odd thing.
They apply logic to something that's very illogical.
Yeah, and they just like throughout the movie that's like a theme where like they are like trying to legitimize and like give reason to why these strange things are happening. And like it's like, well, maybe it's not as bad as it looks. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And I think that something that I really, really like about it from the beginning and what kind of eases us into it, it makes us suspicious, but again, it's not an overt red flag, is that the town, it's one of my favorite staples of like cult movies, cult horror movies, in that
Mm-hmm.
the townsfolk are so incredibly unhelpful, but they're unhelpful with like a smile the entire time. Nobody is outright being like, we're not going to help you. You're wrong. This is not how the things are here. But they're kind of just very aloof in the way that they're very calmly aloof, and that
Like
they're
the
like,
teacher,
yeah,
right?
exactly. That's a,
Like we don't say dead here.
right.
All right.
Yeah, exactly. That's a fantastic example because, especially in that scene, the cop is, of course, he's terrified because he's this very, like, we find out that religion is very at the core of his character to the point
Mm-hmm.
that he won't even sleep with his wife before they get married and all of
Yeah.
these things, which I guess for 1973, that was probably a little
More normal.
more normal. But I mean,
Yeah.
for being 2020 and watching this movie for the first time, I was just like, this guy's got a big nerd vibe. I'm sorry. Like, I'm sure he's a great dude and everything, but he's got a nerd vibe.
Yeah, like let's try a little harder not to, be
Alienate
a nerd
everyone.
and be alienate everybody. Exactly. Be that guy.
That school scene is a really great example because he walks in and he overhears the teacher. And I believe she's talking. It's again, everything is about fertility on the island. And we learn that the
Mm-hmm.
religion, the pagan
Mm-hmm.
rituals and religion that they're involved in, it all has to do with fertility to the point that we get that we see people dancing naked. We get hear the teacher talking about sex with the kids, which is highly suspect given some of them are
That's
way too
yeah. I mean,
young, I feel like.
that scene literally comes directly after like she's talking about phallus, right?
Yeah.
And then like the kids are touching that part of the that
Oh, yeah.
stick,
Yep.
and she's describing,
Hmm.
fertility, from the man to a woman in that exact moment. Yeah,
Right. And there's even like dick bushes everywhere.
yeah.
So they're definitely very on the nose with it, but I just love how the more we understand who Howie is, and
Hmm.
we learn that like this island is basically the entire island is his enemy. It stands
Yeah,
for everything that his way of life is against. And
yeah.
I think that adversary is really great because, again, the townsfolk he interacts with are purposefully not helpful, but
Hmm.
he can't necessarily say that they're evil or that they're trying to stop him. They're just not being
Right,
helpful. Whereas
right.
the culture in general is what he perceives as being overtly evil.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
I'm interested to hear kind of like what your perception was of exploring not only just kind of the town itself, but how his character is so at odds with, he's basically a fish out of water. So what did you think of some of the scenes like the inn scene where he shows up for the first time?
I got to be honest, that scene kind of annoyed me because you have on the wall all the pictures of the different girls who have been sacrificed, that we find out later what the actual deal is with that. And obviously there's that one missing picture.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you're just like, all right, Mr. Detective, like you've done all of this work up to this point, and like you're not gonna really look into like the most obvious reason or the most obvious thing that would be like a clue to where this girl is.
Right.
And I thought it was funny that, you know, he made such a big deal about the island having this fruit, which again, that becomes a bigger theme throughout the movie. And like everything he's eating is like canned foods and stuff like that. And automatically you're just getting this phony sense, and he's getting this phony sense from the island. So yeah, there's that aspect to it. But I don't know about you, but like I was rooting for him the whole movie, even though he was a super religious guy, and even though you're kind of like, this guy's a freaking square, he's so straight edge.
Yeah.
I'm still rooting for him because of the way he's going about it, because he's so patient. He is so patient from the very beginning on with every scene. Nobody's giving him an inch. Like, my guy can't even get peaches. Like, he can't even get real peaches. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, he's just dealing with it. Obviously, like, he gets a drink at one point in the movie, but
you see that he starts to drink more the more stressed out he becomes, where he shows up first and he's like, he doesn't even want anything. He just wants dinner. And then all of a sudden it gets to the point at the end of the movie where he's like, give me a whiskey or give me a bourbon. Yeah. He's just like, starts downing shots because he's like, I'm fed up with these fucking hillbillies on this island.
I can't deal with all of that. Yeah.
But I'm glad that you brought that up, because Sergeant Howie, who's played by Edward Woodward, he really is a character that, even though, like you said, I was joking earlier, basically, where he's just he's very stuck up and all of these things. And it's not necessarily a character that I would necessarily think is that interesting, but in terms of becoming invested in him and wanting him, like you said, he's not given an inch the whole time he's there. He's the only policeman, which is a daunting thing to consider, that you're like, there's a missing girl on this island of, I don't know, a couple hundred people. We're sending you and only you. And so,
that, sorry to interrupt, but that part also kind of added to this rooting for him thing, because he kept saying, like, if I find out that she's dead and that you're not helping me, like, I'm going to come back here with like more people. And I'm like, should you be saying that? Should you even be telling them that, like, you're going to come back and like prosecute these people? Like, is that safe for you to do?
So I was thinking the same thing. It's one of those things where it's like, if you catch on that someone is the murderer or the killer, it's like, you don't say shit until you're ready to take them down. So this idea that he's halfway through the investigation and all of a sudden he's like, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to leave and come back with cops to arrest you. And they're like, okay, so we just won't let you leave. Like, exactly. That would always be my fear. So I would just I'd keep that to myself. So again, that his kind of whole persona that originally I wasn't a fan of, I began to appreciate his character more the farther into the investigation we get, because we realize how the entire film is basically a test for his faith, essentially, and how his faith in being kind of steadfast in those beliefs and those opinions is so pivotal, not only to his character development, but just the construct of the film in general. But I also brought up the inn scene just because I was frankly shocked, given that I haven't watched a lot of 70s movies, but I was shocked to see the amount of sexual content and nudity that was in the movie. That's not something I was expecting from a movie set in the 70s. And again, like, I haven't seen many movies like that, but did kind of the overt sexual content and the lack of violence surprise you as much as it did me?
No, because I feel like it's funny, because I was just talking to my roommate the other day about like blaxploitation films. You know, those films that are like set in the 70s and 60s. Yeah. And I always feel like the nudity is almost expected in a film like that, especially if it's something that's supposed to be more edgy, because this is like a very edgy topic, you know, even for the 70s, like kind of going down that like battling religion and cultism, if that's a thing. So I kind of expected it to be like that.
I guess I should
I expected the nudity to be a thing.
I guess I should rephrase it. It wasn't so much just nudity, because obviously there's been lots of nudity in movies like that and things of that nature in that time period, but it was more along. I was surprised at kind of just the way that they show nudity and how long
Oh, I see.
the shots of nudity were, especially like in the landlord's daughter's dance, where like she's dropping it
That was a
low
while.
and the
Yeah.
camera is like lingering there for a
Yeah, she
while
is.
to the point that I'm pretty sure that actress.
Picking up all the angles.
Yeah, exactly. They're picking up all the angles, and that actress actually, she wanted a body double for
Hmm.
part of that scene, because she was just like, I'm not down with some of the
What's
choreography on this.
happening? Yeah.
But I mean, and then you have like the women that are naked on gravestones, crying and like straddling gravestones in the dirt and
The
stuff, and I was
orgy
just
that
like,
was outside also.
yeah, exactly. And it's. I was shocked at it taking it to a level that you wouldn't expect, I suppose, or I was not expecting. Like, of course, there's always been films where there's topless women and women without clothes on, but I'm just thinking about
There's a lot of it.
in terms of that era, and especially when you're portraying a religion around fertility and nudity. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the things, I didn't pick up on this till like the very end of the movie, but the movie itself feels kind of like a progression in terms of censorship in film in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Like I can't think of many movies from that era that were as progressive in terms of just being like, I don't care what they did in the 60s in movies. This is what we're doing in the 70s now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you kind of touched on it. Like it must have been. I would want to see what the movie was originally rated.
Mhm.
Also, like maybe was it really rated, whatever it's rated now, all the way,
I
like
believe it was rated R,
NC-17?
just
Because it
straight from
feels
the
like it
jump.
would be an NC-17
Right.
movie to begin with, and then like they kind of changed it once.
So this came out in 73, and I don't know if the MPAA had that rating yet. I know that
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure at that point they had PG, R, and X,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure if the nudity would consider, there was enough nudity in it that it would be an X rating. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure X ratings were for graphic content, blood and gore and things like that. But I mean, the rating system was so strange back then that a lot of films kind of fell through the gaps.
Because it's like when was Clockwork? When was Clockwork
Later, I
made?
think that was 86 maybe. My frame of reference is that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out the following year. Came out in 74, and there
Oh,
was some blood in that, so they gave that an R rating.
oh, okay,
But
yeah.
they wanted to
Uh,
give it an X rating, I think, originally. But yeah, I was surprised too, just the lack of violence in the movie.
mhm.
There's only really two instances of violence, which is when he knocks out the jester to steal his costume, which was
Which can you
hilarious.
even call violence? Exactly. It's like a Scooby Doo. It's
Yeah,
like legit
exactly.
Scooby Doo, like
that's
knockout.
that's exactly what I thought when I saw that. I was just like, man, Shaggy's got a mean right. Like,
Yeah.
but then the
So
only
yeah,
other real thing of violence is when he rescues the girl at the end of the ritual, and he
that whole last part of the movie.
yeah, and
Yeah,
there's like three instances. So I guess I was just surprised that there was so little violence, and yet the movie is so tense as it is. And
yeah,
especially the further and further that you realize that this whole society is built around this crazy pagan religion.
and
And
they're all in on it. It's like, oh my god, they
right.
literally are all in on it.
Yeah. And those are the most terrifying kind of cult movies. It's not like a compound, it's an entire
Mhm.
island of people that no matter who you talk to, whether it's men, women, or children, they're all
Yeah,
indoctrinated in this in some way.
yeah. That gives you that eerie, and that's I suspected that in the beginning
Yeah.
just because of how those old men were when he was initially at it's like showing them the picture of the
Mhm.
girl, and they were like, oh, never seen it. I'm like, yeah, well, okay. Now I kind of feel like you have, but
Yeah. I really do love how they just make him be such a fish out of water, especially like when
Mhm.
he walks into that inn for the first time and everybody stops immediately.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those things where, again, like you're never allowed to forget that Howie and also the viewer is an alien essentially. And
Mhm.
I think that Hardy does just such a good job of conveying that and of making, even though we're able to watch this in 2020 and we don't necessarily have the same background or the same frame of just like the religious background and whatnot, you and me specifically,
Yeah.
in terms of going to an island like that, it's still very uncomfortable, even if we don't find what they're doing like as overtly offensive as Sergeant Howie does, which I think is a testament to just the kind of world building. But I can't believe we've gone this long without mentioning our boy Christopher Lee,
I know. I
Lord
was literally
Summer
just about
Isle.
to say that.
I
I
mean,
was just about to say that.
this is a wild performance. What did you think of him as the patriarch of the island?
Well, first of all, it was weird and cool to see him like that
Mm-hmm.
because we know him most notable, for me at least, most notably from like Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like,
Lord of the Rings.
or well, Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
right? But he's in
Oh,
Star
yeah,
Wars
that's
as
right.
well.
He plays Count Dooku. Yeah, yeah.
So like he always plays this like very stern, powerful, and he's still very stern, powerful, but like he's like singing songs.
He's not
and,
so
like,
refined and elegant. Like you
no, he's
said,
not.
in Star Wars or even in Lord of the Rings, he is the not over the top, but he's just very sinister. And
Mhm.
you just know that he's a bad guy from looking at him. Whereas
Yeah.
I think it plays into this idea that perhaps Sergeant Howie is misperceiving this culture because everybody else
Yeah.
is so relaxed about it. And especially when he goes to his mansion and he meets Lord Summer Isle, and he's so elegant, he's very articulate. He's not
Yeah.
this kind of like scruffy, crusty old guy that's a hermit. Basically, he's like a real lord.
Giving him this like beautiful tour, explaining the land, giving him history about his, forefathers and grandfather, and like, yes, so it was a weird, interesting setting that he was in. It just was weird to see him like that,
Right.
but it was crazy because he slowly starts to unravel with the story as time goes on, and you
Yeah.
kind of just see who he really is.
He becomes more and more hyped up for the big celebration at the end.
Yeah, yeah,
But I was surprised to learn. Well, first off, they apparently wrote the role with him in mind, which I think is always telling of the best performances that people give.
Mhm.
I just rewatched The Invitation, and I learned that one of the characters in that the role was written for them, and he's one of the best characters in the movie. I think, like that actor in mind. But also, Christopher Lee said that apparently he wasn't paid for the film. It was one of those things where like he wanted to make it so badly, and they had such a limited budget that he was like, "Fuck it, I'll show up for free," which is a bold move because yeah, the movie's great and it defined his career basically. But
Mhm.
if that doesn't pay off,
Yeah.
that's hard to go back home and tell people, "Yeah, I just spent 3 months filming a movie, didn't get paid, and it's garbage."
Well, as we say, that's like he's a true thespian because he wants to show off the art, and his craft, because it's totally like
A true
acting.
artist.
Yeah, actor 101 is like his evolution of his character from elegant to like just literally like slobbering mad at the end of the movie.
Right. I do love too how even though again, like you had mentioned, even though his relationship and conversations with Sergeant Howie for the majority of the film are very at odds with one another, and they become more and more tense, especially when Sergeant Howie digs up the little girl's grave and there's just a rabbit in it, and he
He's
shows
laughing.
up. For starters, he throws the fucking dead rabbit at Lord Summer Isle and his girl,
Yeah.
and then he's like demanding to know where she is, and the guy's wife or girlfriend is just like, well, she wanted to be a rabbit in the after. Like she's saying this insane shit, but then
Mhm.
Christopher Lee's character is still so matter of fact about everything, and
Yeah.
that to me is actually terrifying. This idea that somebody can say these insane things at you, and yet they're so cool and calm and reserved about it, and it's like, well, you don't.
Normal walk in the park for them. It's
Yeah,
nothing.
exactly. There's nothing. I haven't admitted to anything, and you don't have proof that I've done anything, and yet I'm still going to push this insane rhetoric onto you, and there's nothing you can do
Yeah.
about it.
It's just what we do. It's how we are on the islands,
Yeah.
Like, all right.
I think
Yeah.
in getting into kind of like the celebration aspect at the end of the movie, that is where I see a lot of the comparisons between Midsummer and this. Again, not to bring it back too much to Midsummer, but when people try to compare this movie to Midsummer, I would say Midsummer definitely was able to look at a lot of the imagery from the
Yeah.
May Day celebration in The Wicker Man and applying it to Midsummer in a way that you can definitely see the DNA of it all over Midsummer.
Like, and it's like things I'm just realizing right now that I'll mention in a minute, but it's like just in terms of the environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people on the island and the people in the woods town Midsummer. I don't know if it was a town or what they were really
It was
like
like
a campground or
yeah,
like
it
a
was like a
site
commune.
campsite. Like knowing that everybody is in on this thing, and then like when you're an outsider, you're just kind of spectating.
Mm-hmm.
Like that feeling, you get that feeling in Midsommar, and you definitely get that feeling in Wicker Man,
Yeah.
and just how things progressed slowly. Like there's no real reveal. Like even when you think you know what is about to happen, or you think you know how the movie is going to shape out,
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't until it's happening. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you don't know until it's happened.
Well, this film in general, something that I really was reflecting on in writing up my notes for after watching it was just how well the movie is paced.
Yeah.
It's not even a long movie, but just in terms of the way that they're able to establish the island and the characters and Sergeant Howie, and then how the movie transitions between the investigation phase and then
Mm-hmm.
he's impersonating somebody in this fucked up kind of sun scorched
Weird.
weird
Yeah.
festival, and just the way that the movie so effortlessly transitions from just very like strange and then alarming and then completely
Mm-hmm.
deranged, like it really doesn't miss a beat. And the whole May Day celebration really kicks off when he tries to get into his plane boat, and then those guys are in the background and they kind of pop up behind the fence and they all have animal masks on. And
Yeah.
I just love that scene because he never sees those people, and
Right.
they don't have to, they're not like hooting and hollering and trying to scare him or anything. It's just this idea that the island has you, and even if you don't realize it, you can't escape.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. And I really like that. I like the whole celebration again, seeing Christopher
Mhm.
wearing, he was wearing he had the wig and the dress, and like, he literally is running the crowd. Like
Yeah.
there's that moment when like he makes an announcement and like he literally just like puts his hands to the side and like tells the band to stop.
Mhm.
But the whole time you're watching the sergeant and he's like trying to figure out where things are going. And like you said, the pacing is cool because I love how they're walking. It's like you walking to the doom. He's walking to his doom. You can feel it. And then they get to that one place that's like I forget what the rocks are called. What is the formation of rocks? What are those
Like
called?
Stonehenge,
Stonehenge,
basically.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
like that, right?
Mhm.
And then they have that ritual where they have the knives, and like it's almost like that's the first reveal. Like you think, oh, shit is about to go off right here.
Right.
Starts to build up, and then you realize like it's not really what you think. So you still don't know if we're gonna see the reveal, like the big reveal, and figure out that this island is as sinister as you think it is.
Well,
And then just kind of builds up from there, and it just gets worse. Like you said, I love the pacing, and it doesn't waste any time. It gets to every point it needs to get to.
yeah, that game of Chop again is a moment that's really pivotal and still kind of confusing or challenging the viewer's perception of the entire film, really, because you have
Mm-hmm.
that moment where they're walking through the swords, and then when the
Yeah.
music stops, the guys that are holding the swords basically it's a makeshift guillotine with the swords. So they're supposed to decapitate somebody. And when the top of their costume comes off, you assume they just got decapitated, but then you see the little kid's head pop out of it, and it's like, is this actually as sinister as we assume it is? Or again, is this kind of just a tradition that we're not familiar with and we don't understand?
Right.
So we're just kind of perceiving our misunderstanding as being sinister when
Mm-hmm.
this is just a culture. Maybe this is just a culture we don't understand. And
Yeah.
the music itself is not even sinister. Again,
No.
like this idea that this movie is, I mean, they even said, everybody involved said when they were making it, they didn't think they were making a horror movie. They thought they were
Mm-hmm.
making a musical in terms of just the way that everything is so musically oriented. And
Yeah.
it is very upbeat and lively and joyful. And it's not this kind of sinister, downtrodden music that you would expect in a lot of kind of like overbearing cult movies.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
that entire kind of just celebration in general, I want to remember what the name of the composer was. Oh, Paul Giovanni, who somehow had never scored a feature film. Like, could you imagine you never scored a feature film and it's this kind of just, it's such a part tied into the identity of the Wicker Man. And
Mhm.
again, this is one of those movies that if it didn't have this soundtrack, if you kind of watched this without music, it would be atrocious.
Yeah,
Or
it would
it
be.
wouldn't have the same vibe to anything as it does.
You wouldn't be able to get through it. You'd be
Right.
like, "What am I watching? What does
Yeah.
any of this have to do with anything?" And why are they just standing there?
Well, imagine if you watched the fertility scene and it didn't have that music playing in the background. It would just,
Mhm.
it wouldn't have the same, you would view it as being just overtly sexual for the point of being overtly sexual. Whereas, like you had said, when we watched it, it's very much, it's like a dance almost. And obviously it
Yeah.
is a dance, but it feels like it's a ritual because of the way she's moving, but also the
Mhm.
music that it's it's fantastical, the
Yeah.
music, and it's kind of just, you can feel that there's a deeper meaning to it than
Mhm.
two people that just want to bang really badly. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like there's a deeper meaning to it through the music.
Yeah, there is. And again, it's on top of the music, they're reinforcing that this is normal and like this is okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's okay. Everything that's happening is supposed to happen, and like we got it under control. You don't need to worry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of some of our favorite moments, what's a moment of this film that really stood out to you?
Um, a moment, a moment that really stood out to me was probably, it's weird. There's a couple moments. The very beginning, we get that, and I can't remember what movie we originally had talked about, but we had that shot, the location, and it's just the shaky overhead shot of the island right in the very beginning of the movie when he's flying.
Right.
Very beginning, he's flying, and like the cinematography, and you see the island or islands that he's flying over.
Mm-hmm.
I always think about that when I see movies from that time because again, it's like you just get that like really shaky like helicopter shot. They didn't have like stabilizers and shit like
Right.
that. So like they did that was but like still excuse me. It's still a very cool shot. And I love when they establish kind of where you are. You get to see the bird's eye of the setting that you're in, and then like you're slowly kind of going down into where you actually are. It helps round out the story for me and the location and the
Yeah, that,
setting.
I mean, I love the opening of the movie, not because of the way that it's filmed necessarily, but because of how it drops us. There's such a sense of immediacy
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that this cop has to go to this island because he's received a letter that says this girl is missing, and we're dropped right into his shoes essentially. We don't know
Mm-hmm.
anything about him. We don't know anything about his history. We don't know anything about the island. So we ourselves are very much a fish out of water in that we're
Mm-hmm.
just dropped into this world. And actually, this is one of those movies that was edited to death basically. And so there's like three different versions of this. There was a version that the film begins with him on the mainland, and it's him in a police station getting the letter and getting the assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, if they had included that scene, it would feel more procedural than it is. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like in the fact that we're dropped into this world like a fish out of water, you can feel that there's a sense of a mystery and we're unraveling that mystery
Yeah.
without being told necessarily. Whereas
Yeah.
if we got a 10-minute scene of him at a desk and his boss comes up and he's like, you got to investigate this and that and this, and
It's gonna change how you feel about his character and how you view him through the movie.
yeah, exactly. It's not nearly as organic as, hey, this is the guy. Clearly he's the protagonist because we're in this plane with him and we're dropped
Yeah.
into a world we don't understand.
Yeah. So that was a part that I liked. Another part that really stuck with me was when he's in the classroom and the girl has a frog on a stick. It's connected to
Oh, a beetle, right? Is
a
it a
rope,
frog or
or
a
it was
beetle?
maybe it was a beetle. Maybe it was a beetle,
Mm-hmm.
and she says like it walks around until it can't.
Yeah.
And that was like one of the first I feel like signs that something isn't right. Like there is a sinister aspect because the girl is basically saying the beetle's like gonna hang itself essentially.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's gonna happen. And like even he's like, "Are you mad?" Like he's just like can't believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think he says that a bunch. Like, "Are you mad?" Like he just is like cannot believe what he's seeing. But like that kind of was the first sign for me that like okay, there's nothing normal about any of
Right.
this. No matter what they say, like you got to remember, no, this is fucked up.
For me, that I had that same reaction to that scene when he goes to Rowan Morrison's grave, and there's a piece of her. I don't know. I think it was supposed to be like a strip of
Ooh,
skin or something.
It was I think it was like her like part of her like her uterus or something,
Oh,
right?
Jesus
Because
Christ.
he was saying like it's like something about fertility and like something inside of her.
Oh, Christ.
But yeah, that yeah.
Anyway, seeing a part of her flesh hanging from that, I was just like, yeah, this is a little more sinister. Like, I'm pretty sure that there's some shit going on. That should definitely not be the case.
Yeah, and then like the guy's creepy ass smile
Oh,
when he
yeah.
was like explaining, he's like, "Of course, like, what do you mean? Like,
Well,
they need this for the afterlife." And you're like, "What, dude?"
again, I love how I mean, I don't, no idea who that actor is or if he ever went on to do anything else, but the movie has so many pivotal characters like that guy that
Hmm.
it's such a wide range of roles in terms of like their supposed occupation on the island. Like that guy's the groundskeeper. He goes to the records office. He goes to the candy store, or the post office there. Everybody has that same demeanor in that you're the one that's weird. We're not the ones that are weird. What we're doing here is completely normal. You're the one that is weird for not understanding why we do these things.
Yeah,
And that kind of just, again, it really reinforces the idea that not only is this character a fish out of water, but the viewer is too. And it does make you start to question at one point or another. I mean, when they start burning people alive and whatnot, that's
hmm
when you're kind of like, yeah, okay, I fucked up. But before that, there's definitely one or two moments throughout the film where I'm like, am I the one that's misinterpreting or
yeah.
attributing feelings to things that I shouldn't be? Like, am I the
And
weird one?
here's something that goes along with this that I want to know is you notice that in the very beginning they like right they had like a credit the island they credited the island for like help like their hospitality and like
Hmm.
bringing them into their religion.
Yeah.
And I was almost like, is that a real thing, or are they just trying to already sway us to kind of feel a certain way, like to come in with a feeling like, these people are great and like this is just a nice setting.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
Right. I
maybe,
think some of the extras were just people who lived on the island. I'm
yeah,
pretty sure.
gotta be,
Yeah.
gotta be. But yeah, you just get that feeling. Those are two things I like. Obviously, the ending. I
Yeah.
mean,
I figured we'd talk about the ending.
that's its own. Yeah, that's its own beast.
Yeah.
So, but that was another. The ending was another part that I liked a lot.
Yeah, let's just get into it. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
biggest set piece of the movie, basically. And
Hmm.
for a movie that doesn't features almost no violence,
Hmm.
it kind of makes that scene something that, I mean, when you look back at older movies, like it's not, you've seen things that are far more technical and gruesome and gory, but I don't
In the
know about you,
context of the
but
movie.
in the context of the movie and especially seeing his reaction to being burned alive, I mean, it carries a lot more weight than I expected it to.
Very alarming.
Yeah.
Very alarming. From the moment that we figure out that he's being set up,
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh shit, like,
Which I
oh shit,
loved. I love
oh
that
shit.
twist. I love twists where the hunter is actually the hunted.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. The hunter was the hunted, and like even the fact that the girl was in on it, and like they're all like, "Don't you understand? You are the person.
Right.
You are the person. We need like a virgin male." I'm like, yeah, well, I
Well,
bet you wish you,
yeah.
bet you wish you hooked up with your wife
Yeah.
before you married her.
Or the landlord's daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know where.
I love the contrast between all of the villagers that are having these continual joyous songs about everything, and yet he's praying to God and he's begging God for forgiveness. And
Oh my God.
as
Yeah.
somebody that has presented themselves as a man of God and led their life by being devoted to as a man of God, you see him lose his faith during the course almost of that scene where even though he's still praying to God, you just see how he realizes like I'm fucked and nobody is coming to save me.
Yeah, and I also felt like you said, he was losing his faith, and he was just like holding on to it for dear life. But
Mhm.
there was like the moment where you almost felt like he was gonna get control of the situation, because like right, the whole movie he's trying to just get control and he has none.
Yeah.
And then there's a one moment where he's like explaining, where he's like, well, what if I die and your crops still don't work? Then they're gonna have to kill you.
Right.
And it's almost like for a second, even when they've zoomed in on Christopher's face, you see him thinking about it, and he's registering, and he's like, oh shit, for a second.
Hmm.
But then he finally comes up with his retort. But it was like there was a moment where there was like a little bit of faith that like maybe he's gonna get out of it.
Hmm.
and then it's like, no, it's not going to happen. And then obviously he gets carried by
yeah,
the big. It's always that one big guy.
right.
Always the island guy who's like 7'5".
He got casted because he's big as fuck and he can carry heavy as fuck things.
Yeah,
But
but it was
I
very alarming.
I love the set piece so much in that it was obviously practical. Like I had first assumed it was a miniature, just because of obviously like the size and scale
How
of
big
it.
it
But
was, yeah.
I watched the making of, and they actually built one of those, and it was something where they had to time the shot perfectly, especially when the camera cuts to him staring at the sunset and it's on fire, obviously. But they only had one
I love
shot.
that shot.
They only had one shot at that, and it's like if you're burning that thing, what are you going to build another one all of a sudden? No, they couldn't even pay Christopher Lee. They're not going to pay for another Wicker
Right.
Man.
That was like the perfect that shot with the sunset at the very end. You're like, oh, they did that. Like they killed it because the head falls down and then you just get the sun. Like, and it's like at like the perfect color.
So I saw a research photo that they used because they got the Wicker Man imagery from some ancient pagan civilization where they would fill it with livestock. But there was one where there was a rendition where instead of livestock, all of those little compartments were filled with people. And they would sacrifice, like the arms were filled with people, the legs were filled with people. It was like a nightmare drawing basically. But it made me think that had they ever made another remake of this movie, I would want to get a director that would apply the same level of care to making it be like be very anti-traditional horror movie for 3/4, and then just get aggressive as fuck in that at that ending for the last 10 minutes. Because I don't know. I mean, had Ari Aster not made Midsommar, I feel like he would make something like that, where it's this idea. It's all about the characters until the last 10 minutes, where it's kind of just like hell on earth, like he did with Hereditary.
And it's to add to that, it's like I only just kind of put two and two together that like the end is the same, right? In Midsommar,
yeah,
there's livestock. Mm-hmm. They're in this thing, and it gets burned down, and they die. So it's very much it's like almost the same ending, just two different.
Yeah, they're very similar. And again, I think in finally getting to watch the original Wicker Man, I can see the imprint on tons of different horror movies that I've seen. And even if it's different horror movies that don't have anything to do with cults, at the same time, it kind of just speaks to Robin Hardy's craftsmanship in the way that he filmed this. And of course, Anthony Schaefer's script. But I was interested to learn about the lineage of this movie in terms of, because Robin Hardy, I'm almost certain, only directed this and one other movie.
A few other things.
Yeah, and the other movie that he directed was a spiritual sequel to The Wicker Man.
The Wicker Tree.
Yeah, The Wicker Tree, which actually had a Christopher Lee cameo in it. But the movie was not supposed to be very good.
Right. Well, I mean...
it's just a very, very, for me, interesting idea that somebody could make a movie as pivotal as The Wicker Man, and then not, especially that movie didn't come out till 2011. Right. So it's like he didn't return to film for almost 40 years, 30 plus years, and then just isn't able to kind of like recapture. Obviously, this is why people say like you should not be making sequels to a lot of horror movies, but it's just so interesting to me that this is such a remarkable film in the impact it had on the genre as a whole, but then it got two underwhelming sequels. One official, one unofficial.
They say like it's like a lightning in the bottle situation, you know what I mean? And you can't wait. I just don't see how you can wait for 30, 40 years and try to do a sequel and even get close to what you had at that point, because he was a different person then. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Everybody was different. Movie making was different. So
Anthony Schaefer, the screenwriter, he in 1989, he even wrote a treatment for a sequel. But the big problem was that it was how long was it? It was 16 years later from the original film, and they wanted to pick it up right at the end of The Wicker Man. This idea that Sergeant Howie survives and the cops come and free him on the island, and then he's chasing Christopher Lee around the island, and there's a dragon and all this shit. And I love that I had read this super outlandish kind of plot summary for his idea of a sequel, and they were like, Well, the actor that played Sergeant Howie was too old, so it wouldn't have been realistic. And it was like, you just have a motherfucker fighting dragons and stuff in the sequel. Like, I don't think the age difference was the problem. Like, I think there was a few other
It's the least of your
loopholes.
worries. Yeah.
But they actually made that into a radio play. I think last year or this year, they found that treatment that he wrote and they made it into a radio play. So I think I might go back and listen to it because it's only an hour.
It might be worth a listen. Yeah, I'll do it. It's weird because a part of me really wants to watch the Nick Cage version. Like,
I'm definitely interested, and it's one
just
of
want to see.
Yeah, I want to see just what that would even look like, and to have the balls to be like, hey, I'm going to remake The Wicker Man, which is this movie has to be on like the top 100 horror movies ever made kind of lists. You know what I mean? It has that lineage. We might have to do that one night. We might have to do if I have you back on, we might have to, or I plan on having you back on in the future when you're free. I mean to make that sound so sinister. Maybe doing a commentary or something on that because I don't know, man. From the trailer I've seen and the clips I've seen, Nick Cage certainly gives a performance.
Well, it's sad because I was expecting the scene with the bees, and we didn't get the scene with the bees, and I was like, oh, what about the bees? But then I'm realizing like, oh, they added that caveat because they wanted to like just do as much as they could.
Yeah, and I think that was the main difference between the original film and the remake was that they swapped out the peaches and the livestock for honey. Basically, which I mean, maybe they should have tried. Maybe they should have tried to like change a little more because of how that turned out. But yeah, this was a really great movie to pick. Were there any other moments that you wanted to highlight that I kind of blew past?
Not really. I think just the feeling of him on the plane, him being stuck, him having to use the megaphone, like that whole situation made me nervous every time because it was like, are they going to actually come get him? You know what I mean? Remember when he first got there, they weren't even going to let him on the island. Mm-hmm. They were like, you can't be here. So things like that. But I think you pretty much covered it all. I mean, the setting is he's in an inn and he's outside. You know what I mean? He's in an inn and he's walking. He's in an inn and he's,
Yeah, I mean, to that point, it is a super simplistic movie if you had to describe it to somebody. And for all intents and purposes, the Wicker Man burning is the biggest set piece and the most probably technically impressive set piece. But at the same time, I feel like just the way that director Robin Hardy was able to construct the island, which is very normal seeming, to make it seem so foreign, just kind of with little pieces of imagery. Like there's the eye symbol and crest, and there's all these kind of strange, like you said, when he sees the kids dancing around that pole with the different ribbons and things like that. He's able to kind of inject weirdness into each scene in a way that you can't not notice it, but at the same time, it's not, again, kind of just overtly sinister or overtly deadly just by looking at it. But yeah, this was a fantastic movie for you to pick. I really enjoyed chatting with you about The Wicker Man.
Same with you, man.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Daily Horror Habit on your preferred streaming service and follow @Daily Horror Habit on Instagram and @Daily Horror Pod on Twitter.